10 o'clock, we'll call this meeting to order. Discussion and possible action to excuse any absences. Do we have any?
Well, do you want to do a roll call first?
Okay.
Just to make sure we.
Wasn't on the list. See? It wasn't on there. All right, roll call.
Okay, so, Ron Everett?
Here.
Lee Warren? Here. Scott Regan? Here. Bruce? Here. I'm sorry, guys. Steve Reinhardt?
I'm here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry. Dave Motley?
Here.
I should have had this on. Do we have any other members that I don't see on? Mike Morgan. He's supposed to, I think he's, he told me he'd be here, so maybe we just hold off on not excusing him until he gets here. And who else are we missing? Keisha, yeah. I didn't hear back from her as to whether or not she's going to be here. So, did anybody hear from Keisha whether, Vanessa, did you hear from Keisha whether she was going to be here or not?
I am not sure if she was going to do the virtual or in person. I think last I heard it was in person.
Last I heard it was in person as well.
Okay. So you may want to,
Mike.
you may want to take action on, but let's finish. So Mike Morgan's here, and then in terms of TREIC staff, we have Chelsea Buckholz, our executive director, Tony Slagle, deputy executive director. Go around, Mike.
Michael Malloy, Director of Enforcement.
Excuse me, Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education.
Tony Renteria, staff attorney.
Abby Lee, Deputy General Counsel. Summer Mandel, Government and Strategic Communications Director.
Mike Hovey, Education.
Okay, and then on the call, we've got Chair of the Commission, Scott Kessner, and Vanessa Burgess, our General Counsel. I think that's everybody.
We have a member of the public, I think, over here.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. You want to try?
John Knopick, Staff Attorney with TREIC.
Okay, great.
Oh, cool.
I'm like, I think he works here. Pretty
sure.
Good to see his badge.
Maybe wrong. Denise Sample
I'm
is,
gonna blame folks.
Denise Sample is also on the call, Director of Licensing. So, okay.
So do we need to do anything with Keisha or you want?
I think so. I think you need to.
So we don't know.
I haven't heard anything. We heard she was going to be in person, and I haven't heard anything from her otherwise.
What action do we need to take on that? Just
Do you want to approve it or not?
I guess we have no.
How do we need to prove an absence?
Yeah.
Well, as
Just mark it
excused.
unexcused.
Yeah.
The reason you take action on it is because by rule, if you miss three meetings, you could be removed.
Right, but you only excuse it if there was
Right.
An excuse.
an actual
So it
reason.
seems like you'd wait
So
to see
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So do we wait till the end of the meeting or follow up the next meeting?
Either one. You could wait 10 meetings.
All right. We'll just note it and come back to it towards the end of the meeting. If she hasn't joined, then we'll just mark it excused. Okay, excused. All right. Housekeeping, Vanessa.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry to be remote. I've got a sick kid, but that's the beauty of remote. So just as a quick reminder, since this is hybrid, this is weird for me to do this from virtual world. I normally do this in that room, which is if you are on the committee, if you can have your camera on. If you are not on the committee or not speaking, we ask that you turn your camera off just so that we can keep the members on. We ask that everybody stay muted unless you are actively speaking or about to speak, just because that way the background noise goes away. We will mute folks if it gets real loud and you've forgotten to do that. Committee members, though, please feel free. I think, Dave, you might be the only one who's a committee member remote that I can currently see. You can obviously feel free to speak up the way you normally would in any meeting, et cetera. You're used to this format, I know. If somebody wants to raise their hand, there's a little smiley face with a hand next to it up at the top. And don't forget to, I say unraise your hand. I think I said it a weird way before. Maybe that is the weird way, but unraise it. It takes action on your part. And then I think that's really it. I'm getting some weird, now that I'm on this side, I feel like it's picking up a little bit of weird sound. So I'll monitor that from here and like the actual surfaces, but I'll monitor that and let y'all know.
That's okay. Sounds good. All right, item number 4, remarks from chair. So I attended the commissioners meeting a few months back. They missed Lee. I don't think I messed it up too bad with my report. So I attended that meeting. Stephen and I were on a TREIC call back in February, I believe, and just kind of, there was like 110, 115 people on there, inspectors. You know, we went through a bunch of Q&A, went through the new SOPs. I think the meeting went pretty well. We had a lot of feedback and a lot of dialogue. And we're meeting again via Zoom April 25th, so next Monday at 9. And Tony Renteria is going to be on the call too, I believe, right?
That's correct.
So TREIC is hosting it again. It's another Q&A. Anything else you can think of that went on with the meeting? We had a lot of questions come out of it. Renteria was very prompt in responding to all the stuff that we couldn't answer ourselves. But I think otherwise, everything was fine with that meeting. And that's all I really had.
He was good. We kind of.
Okay, hey.
That's for the record.
Okay. Keisha's here, so we don't have to deal with it. Absolutely. All right. You saying, Stephen?
I was just saying that, the meeting was good. People asked questions about some of the new things. We kind of talked about it in a commentary kind of format in the background, so people would understand it better. I would see that again.
Yeah, Monday. All right. So that's all I have in common now. So, item number 5, ratification of minutes. Any discussion, any corrections or anything for the minutes? Motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Sorry, I didn't mention this. It helps for the record since we're recording this if you can say who the motion was from and who seconded it, so we can have that for the minutes.
Lee Warren made the motion, Scott Regan second.
And it was unanimous.
And it was unanimous. Some hiccups. Me running this.
No, it's a learning curve.
Yeah. All right. Item number 6. We have any comments from visitors on non-agenda items?
Exactly what I was.
Do we have any visitors online?
We do have.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has any comments. Did we receive any written comments from anybody other than the ones that, some of the other ones?
Yeah. So I was going to talk about, I've gotten quite a few emails over the last few months, some from in-house and then others just from inspectors questioning things. We were going to talk about some of those today, but really just having the SOP committee look into. So we had one questioning or some dialogue on checkboxes on inspection reports. So we were going to look at, we're going to talk about that today.
No, we're going to, I think the thought was we have the SOP look at it. Essentially, it's a question about how many checkboxes are appropriate to check per item. There's some questions about that.
Yeah, Stephen Ryan weighed in on that.
I figured out a way. Yes.
Anyway, so.
There was a question because what's possible may conflict with the Inland Ethics SOP update.
Yeah, so we're going to have you guys look into a little bit more and discuss what the intent is and bring that back to the full committee.
So I can send them, would it be appropriate for me to email a list of stuff that's come through?
Well, so that the other thing is just the SOP, and you and I talked about that, but there's some confusion about some of the new items in the new SOP, or some of the items in the new SOP.
Yeah, we were talking about that before the meeting. arc fault protection and stuff. I believe that we took everything straight out of IRC, but to look.
You look at the IRC.
Yeah. So I think there's need to revisit the AFCI and the GFCI requirements, making sure that we're not contradicting anything or leaving anything out the way it was presently adopted, because there was a lot of feedback on the GFCIs, AFCIs, and then also, right,
Yes.
and then there also was conversations about the check boxes on the reports, which was kind of a new topic for me because I've never considered checking 3 boxes. And I had to go to my software provider and actually ask them to get a program where I could do that, to change my settings. Oh, I know. Well,
And the legal, somehow in the legal and ethics, it got biased.
It says 3.
3 says a maximum of 3, but the way the form is filled out.
That's what I brought up to Steve. I called him on that after our first SOP class we had.
When Sean and I were talking about that, we thought it'd probably be better for you guys just to take a deep dive and do it.
Yeah.
You can do that and bring some recommendations back to it.
Yes, Steve and I have been talking about getting a list of everybody.
Okay.
Little C saying you give it to you.
I have my list going too, so.
I think some other items that came up we're going to address later on, as far as walkthrough inspection and signal item inspections. All right. Nothing else. Are y'all visiting today?
We are.
Y'all have non-agenda items, comments, or is it stuff that's on the agenda?
So it's not on the agenda. I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
Has to do with Practicum.
Okay, it is. We're going to be covering it.
Yeah, Jen's gonna cover that in there.
Yeah. All right.
The practical.
Yes.
All right. Item number 7, reports from subcommittee, education. Did y'all meet?
We met, basically just trying to see if there was anything that any of the committee members felt we wanted to start looking at and starting the process on. So we talked about the new legal and SOP course, start getting that ball rolling. Seems kind of soon, but next thing you know, the thing will be right around the corners before you know it. And then looking in general at the continuing education requirements. There wasn't anything proposed or anything like that. It was just taking a good look at them, making sure the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and seeing if there's any changes we might want to look at, because we just haven't looked at continuing education as a whole in quite a while. I think it's been since we changed it to where you can't do more than 16 hours in one topic. I think it was the last change we made to continuing education stuff of any substance. So just something we want to look at. So, but if there was anything else that the full committee wanted education to look at this, let's move it. Start taking again.
All right. And y'all are planning on meeting regularly?
Probably like once a quarter, I would think.
Yeah. All right. And Scott?
We haven't met yet.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll get something on the books based on what you
Yeah.
guys are talking about. Very small.
All right. All right. Staff reports. Chelsea?
Sure, I'll mention a few things. I don't have anything inspector specific, just agency specific. We're definitely back to more in-person meeting. This cycle of advisory committee meetings and then of course the commission, all of those are at least in person as an option. So we're really getting back. We, as staff, are also back. Earlier this year, we implemented a new remote work policy, which we had drafted after learning the lessons of COVID and making plans for post-COVID. I don't know that I don't know that COVID is in our rearview mirror, but we have implemented that policy to operate in a more long-term capacity. And that has some remote work and some in-office work each day. Doesn't really change how we serve the public because we were able to do that fully remote. So coming back, people really shouldn't notice one way or the other. The only real difference is that our lobby is open and we can receive visitors, though the number of visitors is certainly less than before the pandemic. So we'll see if that lasts or if that's just slowly return. We've got our next commission meeting on May 2nd, so that is upon us. And so we're marching towards that date. We're also in the midst of strategic planning season, legislative planning, and drafting our new budget, which will start September 1st. So there's a lot of moving parts related to all of that. In terms of strategic plan and legislative plans, I think this will be, we're very early in the process. The only item that is on the list of things to address with the legislature, really related to inspectors, is to revisit what was on the legislative agenda last session. So through recovery fund, eliminate the recovery fund, and then also to eliminate that mid-level.
The real estate inspector license,
There you go.
just have it be apprentice and professional.
Yeah, so basically to keep moving towards those initiatives, the hope of success there. That's really kind of a remnant of the sunset review. It's just trying to streamline. So that's what we're working on. Tony, do you have any?
I do. I want to address the pocket edition of the SOP and just say that the agency has stopped sending those out to people who are requesting it. There is an online version available on the website that's fairly easy to access. That being said, Summer Mandel, who is our communications director over there, sitting over there, she and I met last week, and she and I are working on a version that, and I say this so I hope everyone hears it, that will be significantly easier to print out than the last one we had. That one on the last one we had on the website was admittedly not user-friendly. So she and I are going to be working on that. Hopefully we'll have something up in the next couple of weeks for inspectors to be able to go on and print something out. It'll likely be a little bit larger than the one we have, just to make it easier to print, so there won't be any cutting or anything, but it will be color-coded and everything for anybody who has a color printer. But we do understand that people have utilized that item and like it. Again, we do have a version online that is accessible on your smartphone. It's not an app, but it is accordion so that you can pull that stuff up, and it's the SOP. You should be able to use it on your phone in the meantime until we get that up, and continue to use it, but until we get the printed version up on the website. So we just had an overwhelming request for the pamphlets in a way that we haven't had in the past. So.
I would say the online version that you have now works awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, as far as having an accordion, like you say, so if you know you're going to one, you just kind of table the contents.
Yeah.
You don't have to scroll down through 30 pages. I think it works great.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. We're hoping that people will utilize that a little bit more. That's why we developed it. It's not, like I said, it's not an app, but it's the next step towards that. And like I said, we'll get, for those of you who want a hard copy and didn't get a chance to get the first iteration of the books, we'll have something up online that you can print out and access. So that's all.
$50.
Yeah.
Plus shipping and handling.
All right.
That's all you have? That's all we got. Thanks, John. And enforcement, Mike?
Michael Malloy, Director of Enforcement. If you go to page 3 of materials, it's the first page of the report. And this is the 3 cases that we've done since we all last met. This report basically goes all the way up till the end of March. So I think we may have had another order since then, but it was a good cutting off point for us. So basically there's 3 cases here. The first one was a more administrative complaint. You probably don't see this very often. This is actually a background history case. And the person didn't answer back on the background history issue. So it didn't deal with the consumer complaint, just to clear that up. And then the last 2 ones were consumer related complaints and dealt with negligence in the inspection process.
I think that second one's interesting because it's the roof one, it's a single story,
Yeah.
lower pitch roof. I really hope a lot of inspectors read that one, because I think that one is happening more than we're getting complaints on.
Yeah.
Because I hear other inspectors, single story, 412, oh, it's just too dangerous for me to get on. I'm like, no, it's not how it works.
I see that a lot.
Yeah.
They kill clients on, too old to go on the roof.
Right.
And the,
Well,
You'd be surprised what we hear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When you hear those same people putting their own Christmas lights up.
yes.
Are those people who routinely don't walk the roof?
Yes.
So there's new requirements that they need to follow for that. They need to tell the
Exactly,
client
yeah.
before they.
Completely understand, that's why I say, I'm actually glad this is
Yeah.
coming up, and I hope a lot of inspectors read it, because it really stresses what the rules are. I mean, it's just, there's no reason that, with that example, as it reads in the order, there's no reason you should put that on there.
and it might be something good to talk about on Monday, because when we're doing the Zoom meeting, because I'm like Lee's talking about, a lot of people routinely depart and stuff, and there's never any kind of notice provided.
Yeah, and I mean, they can do that. They just need to let the
Right.
client know ahead of time. So the
Yeah.
client can say, well, I want my roof done,
And I think the third one is a good example of that too, because how many
The foundation
inspectors
one?
refuse to crawl spaces always? And this one clearly has the 18 inches of clearance.
There was a lot going on in that last one.
Yeah, there is a lot.
I think Sean, did you look at this one? I think someone, we
Is that John's case?
yeah, I think we referred to one of you guys to look at it.
I did speak to one of our people on the expert list. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out who I spoke
Yeah,
to.
oh, it
I
was one
think
of
it
you
has
guys,
12, but you don't really want it.
yeah.
Okay.
And some of the discussion is being able to determine the difference between a departure that you never do
Right.
and a departure and a dangerous, item you find when you get there.
Right.
I do roofs, but then you get there and it's a metal roof,
Yeah.
a little wet, that maybe I didn't see.
There's ice.
Most of us
Yeah.
do a straight view and look at it, like you say, it looks like, okay. But there are things that I usually do, like, if I did 20 houses and I did them on 19 and one I didn't do, I don't think it's routine.
Right.
So is that a departure, or is it just not inspected because of?
Well, that's why the wording is routinely depart.
Yeah,
And
so
when
if you get there and it's not safe, you're not inspecting it, but you're not triggering the departure rules.
That's
I
what
think
they
there
try
is still
to
some
check.
notification where you talk to the client.
Yeah, I mean, you still have
You
to.
can let them know it
notify 'em.
first.
Yeah, it's not something you need, that's not a routine departure where you have to
Yes.
let them know and provide a notice or whatever. So.
That was a good discussion.
And is everybody still getting the emails for the disciplinary stuff?
I have done some of this last time.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't think I've
I
got,
didn't see this last
I
one.
don't think I've got so many emails.
Should have gone out. We'll have to look into it. We were updating the email list, so.
I think I got the one on the January, the administrative ones, but I don't recall seeing the last two.
Okay.
Double check, because we've committed that.
Yeah, those should have gone out.
You got it? Okay, good, that makes me feel better.
Just let me know.
Someone's
You
got
got
it.
it. We just do the, there's a group email list that we just.
Because I actually changed, I saw the list that when it came out of January, and I called him and said, hey, the email was going wrong. So I updated everything, and that's why I went.
Okay.
Hold on.
So that list that was sent out, check that one.
All right, anything else? Thanks, Mike. Education, examinations discussion.
Got it. Morning, everyone. Again, Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams. I want to address a couple of things before we get to my reports. Just some items that have seemed to have generated some interest recently. The first is a question that has been posed by some of our education stakeholders regarding the inability for TREIC to carry over ICE credit that exceeds what is necessary from one license renewal term to another. So for example, let's say in a 2-year period, you take 42 hours of continuing education, and the question is, why can't that extra 10 carry over to the next license term? And so I just want to remind anybody who might have a question about that, that that's actually a statutory requirement. It's in 1102.205 continuing education requirements. And it says as a prerequisite for renewal of a real estate inspector license, professional inspector license, or apprentice license, the inspector must participate in the continuing education program and submit evidence satisfactory to the commission of successful completion of at least 16 classroom hours of real estate inspection courses or continuing education courses for each year of the license period preceding the renewal. So that's where that's captured. So that's in the statute. It would require a major legislative change, which I don't think anybody is really that interested in pursuing, to change that. And I also just wanted to add that I think that, you know, the fundamental purpose of continuing education is to ensure that license holders are receiving regular industry and professional updates that are found in those continuing education courses. And given that we are charged with ensuring license holders meet minimum standards to ensure continued consumer protection, that's the purpose of that.
Well, key word there is minimum.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
minimum.
Right,
number, you
right,
know.
and that's,
We encourage
you know,
more, but
and to your point earlier, Lee, you know, you said that if the education committee wants to revisit education, and look at raising that, because like you said, it is a minimum.
Well, and it's that idea that, you know, not all CE you take is eligible for credit, right? You do it to hopefully make yourself a better inspector and learn some other stuff, but there is a minimum requirement in order to get your license or get this.
Exactly, yeah. The
And they
minimum
need
requirement and then also your professional development.
to- Yeah, they need to stay up to date. I don't think there's any other licensing for termites. TDA doesn't allow you to do that. Texas Department of Health, Texas Department of Licensing, no one that I'm aware of allows you to carry over.
that's why it's called continuing.
Right.
Right.
And isn't most of the schools now doing the data entry for the classes? that
They are, yes,
Okay.
they electronically
Where it
submit
says
that course
the
completion.
inspector must provide information, the schools are providing the information now.
That's true,
We're all using the portal system.
Yeah,
right, right.
they should update.
It does.
Yeah.
And I forgot,
But-
are there any more questions on that?
Well, like with an Internachi certificate, you have to send that in, typically.
Because they don't have it.
Right.
They should.
Internachi doesn't.
Yeah.
No, Internachi doesn't.
Internachi doesn't. You take a,
AHIT, Internachi,
take a CE class, you download the certificate. I usually email on in, get up my history.
Not that they're.
As far as I understood, they were posting through the CE posting system.
So we'll
And I don't
double check
know,
on
Lee, do you know, yeah, we can look into it, and if there's any,
Yeah, just want to note, if there's ever a disciplinary action and they're ordered to do any type of education, that they have to send in directly to us.
Okay.
But we'll look into the CE thing, because your understanding is every CE provider is using the portal now? Yeah, so we'll report back to you guys, or we'll report back to the education subcommittee and then you guys in July about that.
right. Okay. Yeah, we'll look into that. I forgot to mention before I got started though, that Mike Hovey is here. He's our education team lead. We have, if you are seeking CE credit or being a part of or attending this meeting, there is the sign up sheet right by the door. I feel like everybody is signed in, but I just wanted to get that out there. Okay, next I wanted to address the practicum. As you all know, since COVID, the practicum was always intended to be live and in person. And as a result of COVID, the staff and the agency made an allowance, a temporary allowance. We didn't know how long temporary was gonna be. But for that to take place virtually, where the instructor and student are live, you know, via technology, but can hear each other, see all the systems and all of that. We got pretty close to deciding to end the virtual practicum, and then Omicron hit. So we put a pause on that again. but I think that, I think we're ready to move forward with ending that virtual allowance now. Staff is going to work on a communication plan and work with our education providers. We don't necessarily want to interrupt something that's already scheduled. But we are going to be bringing that to a close, and I'm happy to, if you guys have any input that you want to bring to that. I feel like this committee has been pretty ready for that to happen for a while, and
it is established by rule that it's in person. It's a
Right.
rule thing. It's not just that the allowance was made obviously because of the pandemic, but it is, the rule requires it to be in person.
Was it ever brought to the committee initially to approve it, or we just went, the commissioners?
Yeah, that
Wanted, right?
It was part of our,
I just wanted
part
to-
of our response to the
Right.
pandemic. We
Right.
did that for like, exams and everything, kind of switched to virtual,
Yeah.
because we didn't want to disrupt people who were trying to get a license. We wanted to make
Right.
an allowance.
I just want to clarify that we didn't approve it, and there's not a need for us to unapprove the move or whatever.
that's right, yes. Like Tony said, it was all a part of the agency response to governor directives and the pandemic and all
We
of
found
that.
out after that.
I think we're encouraging them to get rid of it. Since kids are in school and
Right.
students are in school, and then they leave the classroom, and the instructor goes out, and the student goes home and watches them on FaceTime. It's like, they're in class. So, yeah, I think it's.
I think there's some comments from the public on that.
Yeah, so well, quickly, I don't want to stop this. But my name's Tom Langley, and I own Turkey Home Inspection. I'm also an instructor for ATI, which Scott owns. And I gotta tell you, I've noticed some real changes since COVID hit. I used to do live and in-person training. We didn't have any problem getting into houses. We could have multiple people there. It was no issue. One of the challenges that I found doing it virtually was every time I call to get a house or ask permission to have students, perform, because I have to be there for a lot longer, basically.
Okay.
People are always asking me how many people are there. I don't want a bunch of people in my house. So that's just part of it. Another part of it is we're teaching a curriculum. So it's not bad habits. We don't want inspectors to get bad habits by going out with other inspectors that have bad habits. So we don't teach those bad habits. Let those inspectors get their own bad habits, right? Which they're gonna do, granted. And the other biggest thing is who's going to say a student didn't pay a little extra to have that practicum sign? How do you know? You don't.
In person,
You don't.
referring to have it signed in person.
The form.
I mean, what's backup do you have to say, here's an extra $100, can you sign it and let me go on with my job?
No, that's a form.
There's a form that they have to fill out.
But I mean, fraud isn't limited to in-person, fraud can be done virtually as well.
Well, not just school. It doesn't happen. So you have the video that backs it up, you have the students in class, you have the instructor communicating with the students. There's more of this is what happened. There's proof.
I'm confused. Are you promoting the virtual training?
Absolutely.
So the requirement for the student to actually do an inspection, you think should be replaced with the student watching somebody do an inspection?
So I think it's the idea behind virtual inspections is or any type of practicum, is they have to learn how to inspect the item.
But they've never touched it virtually.
Well, they do
touch it.
They actually, we go through it, and then they go do theirs, they present their findings to me, and then we do it again. And it's what are these items called? What is the proper terminology? How do you inspect it properly without the bad habits?
Where do you, just a question for clarification, where do the students, so if you do a virtual inspection of a system, and then you said then they go and inspect it on their own?
So.
How does that, I'm just trying to understand what it means.
Let's take a dishwasher, for instance. We go through the inspection process, all the component names, what to look for. These are the common issues that you find with dishwashers. And then they get to go and look at their dishwasher and compare their notes during a 5-minute break.
Oh, in their own
And
home.
then in their own home, and then they come back and they tell us what they found, and then we go through it. But it's up close, it's personal, so we can take that camera and put it directly on a deficiency, instead of 4 or 5 guys looking over shoulders and being in somebody's house. Really don't want that to be, because to find a vacant house right now, they're flying. You just can't get it.
No, and I'll absolutely agree with you there. That is certainly the case. But we're talking, it's 40 hours, right?
Mhm.
Practicum 5? I believe it's 5 minimum, right? 5 minimum.
Inspecting their own.
So are they
house
doing,
5
they're
times.
inspecting their own house 5 times?
No.
That's, I mean, that's, I'm just looking for
I know,
clarification.
so we go out to 5 different houses and we inspect 5 different houses. They have to fill out an inspection report according to what they're seeing through the camera, talking to the inspector.
But isn't there some bias to that? If you're showing them in the camera, aren't you kind of feeding it to them and spoon feeding it to them? Like, oh, look here, it's what's in the camera?
Well, no, so how we do that is we scan across, they have to pick it up, and then we come down closer and show them and explain to them why this would be a deficiency, how it relates to the standards of practice according to how it's supposed to be, according to the Max Fisher Code. And we all go by that. I mean, we have to have a guideline of this is how it's supposed to be and this is how it's not supposed to be. Now, what does the SOP say we have to do that? So we formulate all that into the classroom experience.
So they're getting a video of 5 different houses.
Absolutely, live. Yeah, we go to the house, we have mobile hotspots, we're able to communicate with them. We see them all on screen, they all have to have their cameras on, they have to participate. And then as practice sessions, now it's your turn, go inspect your dishwasher, go inspect your water, go look at your people.
I can certainly see where there's value to that, but for me personally, with the practicum, for people that are trying to get into the industry, they're very new into the industry, me personally, I just don't think anything takes the place of physically touching, smelling, feeling, and walking through that house. I mean, the goal of all of the qualifying education in the practicum is that by the time they're done, they should be ready and raring to be able to go into that first house completely and totally on their own and go get them. And I have a hard time with, if you're doing that virtually and they're basically looking at a screen, to transitioning immediately to going physically into a house.
We have a lot of
That's
students
too big
who
of a
feel the
jump.
same way at the beginning and towards the end of that, they have a totally.
I can see what everybody's talking about here, but I think the issue is it requires a rule change, which is not what we're.
So there's a couple of things. There's the statute that allows for up to 40 hours of in-person, and that was put in for the very reason that you guys articulated, which is there's a concern that inspectors we're getting a license without having any hands-on experience before they go into a house.
And that's because by statute, we couldn't have a forced apprenticeship.
Right, so now there's this allowance of 40 hours. And so when you guys were revamping the qualifying education, you said, okay, how can we get this concept of rely on and make it a little bit more meaningful? So that's when the practicum came in. You're absolutely right, it's a rule change, it's required by rule to be in person. It's not the allowance was allowed again because of the pandemic, and that, for all practical purposes, in terms of that allowance, it needs to end. So it would be a rule change to get it to go to a virtual process.
The other issue is you, myself, cannot put them on our insurance. So are we willing to allow them to touch and feel?
Well, you have to notify your insurance that you have a field trainer.
Right.
If you are a trainer, that's insurance required.
Doesn't the school cover it?
The school does, but if you're a
school
field
now.
trainer, and you don't notify your insurance that you're training and that you might have right along with you, and that their name has to go on the report that you do, and their license number is 0, because that's training. And that's actually in the ethics of somewhere, I remember, somewhere's in the law it says that. It's there. They have to be on the same report too.
Right. So my insurance will not allow me even field training. I check it.
Then there may be another insurance you need to look at, and that's not a reason to change the rule, you know, so.
Scott?
Are we getting any feedback from any other instructors that can't provide insurance or anything?
I haven't heard anything about insurance.
Are there any providers that are doing it in person right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have 6 next week.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Mr. Chairman, the committee, thank you for letting me talk for a couple minutes here. I'll keep it brief. I'm Scott Newcomer. I own ATI Home Inspector Training. For the people that don't know, I also started AHIT. So I've done a little bit in the training world in this country and the state, a lot of business in the state. And for any other confusion, by the way, I do agree with 10% on the continuing education credits. You take 50 this year, you should take at least 60 next year. But Brian Murphy, I don't know why he wouldn't agree with me on that, because he actually still owns Rex Training. People get very confused. We actually own Rex Home Inspector Training. Brian and Don Stafford called me and said, I can't stand what we have to do and the regulations and all this stuff. We don't want to teach anybody anymore how to become a home inspector. We just want to do Cs. So there is some confusion there. I want to clarify that we actually own Rex Home Inspector Training for the initial licensing, not for the continuing education, because we get calls, especially when Brian's out in the class, we get calls all the time. So I've been doing this for 30 years, I'm teaching and training across the country. I've done 10,000 home inspections myself. I've had 3 multi-inspector firms in 2 different states. And when this COVID thing hit, I would agree with all of you that there's no way to learn other than hands-on and being there and crawling through. However, my staff convinced me right before COVID, we actually started trying this virtual thing and this whole Zoom and go-to meetings and all these things that I'm not computer literate. But just watching it, and I've been down here with Tom, with J.D. Fuller, and was the soul for years and years and years, who talked for me in both companies actually. In taking people out and training myself, when you take four people out, only one person, maybe 2 people, can see what the inspector's doing. When you take them out to a site, I've seen other ones too, when we go to electrical panel, we all touch it accordingly. When you're on the site, these guys, you don't have all 4 of them walk to the electrical panel, touch it, and take the screws up, and the screws back down. The next guy goes up, takes the screws up, takes the screws up, right? You don't do that. I've never seen that done. I've talked to hundreds of people. You just don't do that. The instructor goes in and takes the panel. Now you explain what you're doing even through the system that they're following through. You crawl through an attic or you crawl through a crawl space, which we all love about our jobs. When the inspector or the instructor's in that back corner looking at the mold, the rot, whatever it is, 4 guys are behind them, they're not right there. Will they come? Maybe, maybe not. But the good news is, the way we do it, it's completely videotaped. You can call up and find out and look at every one of ours and take attendance with their driver's license twice a day. I mean, it's all there, it's all documented. There's no shortcuts. You can see what's going on with this. And so from a regulatory standpoint, and just so you all know, I was also a state legislator for 6 years, so I played in the political world and sat on the other side and passed all those rules and did all those types of things. But you can actually oversee this, where, like you said, if you take 4 people in the field, charging whatever you're going to charge, will they go up on the roof? When you have 4 guys out there, you have 4 inspectors out there, is your insurance going to cover all 4 of those inspectors up on the roof? It's 6-12 years. Then are they going to crawl up to the top and look at the chimneys and look at the flashings and look at all those things? Where Tom's crawling up anything that's an 8-12 pitch, and they're looking at that right there visually. So I think you really need to think about and consider this, because it's something that, or do some more due diligence and get some information from us or from whoever is doing this and see exactly how this training is occurring. Because I wasn't so bad to begin with, but after now over 2 years of doing this, I am. The only thing that you're missing, which is a good thing or a bad thing, is the smell. Other than that, you're looking exactly what that inspector's doing, following them from driving up, looking at the macro pictures, what I call it, to the micro picture, getting up close. You're seeing exactly what the inspector's seeing with the cameras, the GoPros, the body cam, all that kind of stuff. You're seeing everything. Versus you're not seeing, I mean, it's a different style of training that I think is very, very good. Our students love it. There's no question about it. We could have brought in a dozen people today and made this meeting go on even longer and said how great this was and everything else. But it's just something that I think, and I want to clarify too, because my understanding that in the rule that it's hands-on by means of technology, that it can be delivered. My understanding is what it says.
For the practicum.
For the 40 hour, if the 40 hours of practicum is approved as a classroom, you can deliver it that way.
I thought the continuing education could be done via technology, but not that initial practicum.
If you're approved, and here's the key to this, if you're approved, the 40 hours is approved as a classroom course, you can deliver it via technology.
But I think the idea of the classroom was the house.
What?
The house you were at.
I think that it is, that you raise an interesting point. I don't, it's actually several. When we developed the practicum, I don't think we intended to apply the delivery method definitions to that. Which I think is what you're getting at. Like the way that we define classroom course now is synchronous, either live or in person, or through technology. So you could theoretically apply that definition to practicum. But I think generally speaking, I don't think the intent was to apply a delivery method. I think the thought behind practicum was practicum in person, you know, a physical, like an internship. You know?
I get the concept.
But
on both sides of that as well.
Yeah.
From a legislator, I wrote legislation got passed and there's unintended consequences that you have, then you have to deal with and you have to go back and correct if you have to. Because our 40 hours is approved as classroom training. It's a classroom course, which according to your rules, it says we can deliver via technology. That's probably an issue that we don't want to dive into here, because it's right.
I generally take notes of
that. So, you know, being.
I think we need to look.
Well, I want Abby to mention, or Vanessa to weigh in on this, because there's a general, we can look into it, but there's a general application of the rule, and then there's the specifics, and I don't know which one governs, because the practicum specifically says, shall be in person. It says that, I'm just looking at it right now. Which shall consist of a minimum of 5 complete and in-person inspections.
I think what you're asking for is to have a rule change, which you can petition to do.
I agree.
In this COVID world, which is outside of our rules, we need to get back to our rules. But that doesn't mean that our rules have to remain exactly as they are. You can always ask for a change.
No, I understand, but in my humble opinion, the way, and it's something I think that needs to be looked at, and I know what the practicum says, but when it comes to delivering your training methodology, if you're approved as a classroom, which our course is approved, and others are as well. So whether it's Champion or whoever, if your 40 hours is approved as a classroom can be delivered via technology. So we have some conflicting things going on here that needs to be clarified. So I'm just bringing that up because it could potentially create an issue, but regardless of that, I believe, and I thoroughly believe, it's an excellent way to deliver training, and I still believe that now as well. So.
Well, the key thing is the inspector ready to inspect the house whenever he gets all of this? Can you turn him loose and let him do it? Now, the only reason I'm asking this is because I have inspectors call me up after they got their license. They want to ride around to see how to inspect the house. I don't think the ride around works, and I don't know if classroom training will work.
I agree with what you're saying in a lot of ways, because is any inspector ready to go out after 5 inspections?
I mean, anybody who's trained anybody wants to follow around them before anything happens. Verify.
Just when this is done, but
Yeah.
the general counsel wants it.
I mean, I see what you're saying there, but do you understand our intent was to try to ensure that student gets their license, and the first one they go out to do for pay is the first one they've ever done, and the first report they've written on their own. And the idea is to avoid that, because we can't do apprentice, we can't mandate apprenticing. And like he says, I get calls probably weekly, so I just got my license, but I really need to see how an inspection is done. Can I come right along with you? And I'm thinking, well, that was the intent of the practicum, and they're like, well, I watched somebody for 40 hours doing inspections, but I never really.
They've never walked it.
I've never done it myself.
Well, even if they've walked it, a lot of it with a vacant house, with no buyer, no seller, everything else. So if you go through any kind of training, if you're going to a vacant house and you got 4 guys there with you, 4 inspectors there with you, going through the training, have they really ever done it by themselves? The answer is no. And have they actually seen the live home inspection with a realtor, with the buyer, with the seller, all of the factors and all of the buyers, relatives that are there? I mean, we all know what this is all about.
We don't teach that.
But you
communication.
can't teach that in the training class, whether you're live or not. You can't teach a live home inspection. And you shouldn't be taking people on live home inspections. I mean, that's not a training methodology. Because I know when you go on, and I have 18 inspectors work for me, and I train guys all the time. Home inspectors. And if I went out there and I spent an extra hour or 2 hours or 3 hours with them at a live inspection, what do you think? Do you think that a realtor will ever use you again? And the answer is absolutely not. You can't train doing a live home inspection, especially if you can take 4 people out there when you're going on, or 2 people out on a live home inspection, we'll call it, with the buyer and the seller and the realtor. The answer is no way. You can't do it. So you have to find a vacant house, or not even a vacant house, a house, to take them in. So most home inspectors aren't seeing it live. So yeah, I mean, when they get done and they want to go out and see a live one, they'll make a phone call to see if they can get it.
Vanessa's got her hand up online.
Yeah, I was just, can you hear me all right?
We have Vanessa, thanks.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, and maybe I'm going to go back a little bit to something that Chelsea said. So what originally came up is that you know, we're concluding that virtual component, right? That's happening. The commit, you know, we're working on the communication strategy with that, as Jen mentioned, to go away. I think Chelsea's also right that what this conversation is starting to evolve into is, it sounds to me like there's 2 things. It sounds like there's questions being raised as to the language, the in-person language. I think that's something that staff can digest and look at. And if it seems like there is a need to update it just based on sort of the TREIC terminology, or if there's not, as I recall with the governor's office, they seemed very clear when we were going through this with regulatory compliance that this was an in-person component, but I'm happy to take that feedback and go look at it with staff and see maybe there's a way for that to be more clear. And if there's a need for discussion about, you know, do we need to change that permanently? I think that would really need to go through, you know, either this committee could pick up that discussion and make a recommendation that they want to talk about that at the next meeting, or we can have a petition for a rule change that would happen outside of the normal rulemaking to say, hey, this is something that we need, and there's a process in our rules for following that. Absent that, I think, you know, you really need something that's on the agenda for full discussion. What Jen's really reporting on here is that temporary sort of COVID-related allowance has got to come to an end. Everything else has come to an end. This is a little bit of a holdover, and the intent has always been for that in-person component. I'm happy to take the feedback and go look at the language there, but that's something that we would need to do, not in this meeting.
No, I understand that. Thank you. And just so, from my clarification standpoint, I understand what, I mean, we all had to adapt for COVID, but it was for that in-person ride-alongs that this was, the emergency rules put in place, not for a classroom approval. So some things that need to be discussed and take a look at, and
I think they understand what
Yeah.
they need to look at.
So,
But we can, if you want to send me, what might really be helpful for me on that, in that regard, and I'm really sorry I'm not there in person, would be if you could send me written comments and email to that effect, and then that way I can really look through everything that you're raising, digest it, go back and forth, look at the language, and if the route is we need clarity in the rule, I'm always happy to get clarity in the rule. And if it's that perhaps the route is proposing a rule change, we have a mechanism for that you could, like, I can help walk you through that process as well. It probably won't happen as part, well, it won't happen as part of public comment here. It doesn't sound like they're wanting to take it up. I'm not going to speak for the committee in terms of an agenda item for that, but even then it would have to be for the next meeting. But I'm happy to work with you, sir, and go back and forth and hear those concerns. For me, I think it works better if you can send it in writing for us. That way I can make sure I address every single component of that. And we can get you the general counsel inbox and you can provide that. And I'm happy to work with you on that, because I see what you're saying. I also know what the intent is, and you're right, intent and reality. We just need to look at it and make sure we don't have a disconnect.
Thank you, I appreciate your input. So somebody will give me your information?
Yes, we'll get your email.
How about I give you, are you gonna send an email to me?
Let me take your
Oh,
card and I'll
invite-
email you
okay,
that.
perfect.
It's general.counsel.
That's awesome, that's my email personal. By the way, I signed in the wrong one, I came in late, and I don't need CEs for Texas, so just so you know, but I said number, and I went dash, 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 just so you know, when you see that on there, I mean, okay, so. Anyways, I know it's gone on kind of long, but any other questions for me? I'm happy to answer.
Two things y'all will clarify that.
Yeah.
We can move forward with anything you email, and then just the Education Committee. I think we should just take a look at that if y'all want to make any recommendations to the full committee about considering that. Just to do more
Yeah.
research on what they're
I
doing.
think
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I have a full understanding and you've made some really good points, and I think,
Yeah.
like Vanessa said, we'll talk, work with general counsel
Sounds
and
good.
probably bring it to the next education
yeah.
committee meeting if that's what needs to happen.
That sounds great. Thank you for your time, we greatly appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jen, did you have anything else?
I do.
All
Tony, do you have the exam pass rates that I emailed you last night?
I don't have it up, but I can get it. If I can access it.
I had no idea that my final education report would take up so much of the meeting.
Look at you stirring the pot.
I know.
Jen, you sent it to me?
Mm-hmm, yesterday evening.
Right.
Somebody's doing it that's on the committee.
There is one committee member that's on the
Yeah.
top, so.
Okay, all right.
Okay, this is February fiscal year to date data. I shared this with the education subcommittee meeting and thought you might be interested in seeing it. I just wanted to point out there are a couple of highlighted areas that you might find of interest. The top portion is basically the old exam. The bottom portion is the new split exam. So I've highlighted some areas that might be of interest. We don't have that many that have continued to take the old exam. June of this year would be the last point at which anybody could take the old exam, because it's 90 days post March, which was the implementation date. So that being said, I'm showing this to you, but I'm also going to give you this caveat that it's still not enough information to really make any substantive conclusions from, because we really need 2 full years of data, and this is only 1 year, and one old, 1 new. But just thought, since I shared it with the education subcommittee, that you guys might be interested in seeing it. We'll keep an eye on this, and but I think we'll be able to see some significant impacts of the new education requirements within the next year.
The pass rates are about pretty similar.
Actually, they look higher. I thought
Yeah.
the previous ones were much lower than that.
I thought we were still under 50%.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the first time pass rate was low.
But it's showing 60.
Well, so,
Well,
yeah,
Well,
so
that's-
it's
That's
only
the
their
national.
bonus.
Right,
Yeah, state
right.
looks a lot better.
That's, yeah, the top portion is just, is the combined report, state and
Okay.
national result combined. The bottom half is that split. So I think you're seeing, you know, higher numbers on the professional side as opposed to the real estate side. But again, this is just the first time pass. When you factor in, typically, if you don't pass an exam on the first time, you have a harder time passing it. And
Yeah.
so then that factors in maybe 2 or 3 fails before you can actually pass. So that's where the adjustment is. But anyway, really, this is just for informational purposes. And we'll keep monitoring the impacts of the great education changes you all made.
All right.
And lastly is actually the report. And this will be quick. So the first report is the fiscal year to date report through February on qualifying course and provider apps. What's that?
I wasn't sharing, I was still sharing your.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, it's up there, but it's not.
Not on the other one.
Oh, okay. Got it.
The left is what they see.
Ah, very good. Okay, so this is qualifying course and provider applications. We've had a pretty steady flow of course inspector qualifying courses submitted to date. And that is, I believe I shared with you last time, we had a couple of new inspector education providers join us. So that's really great. The next report is fiscal year to date continuing education course and provider applications. You'll notice if you look at the top half, applications received December, January, February, we've experienced a little bit of a drop, but that's pretty common when you're over the holidays and first of the year. Overall, we're steady. We've got 20 CE providers that are currently offering inspector and continuing education courses and over 280 available ICE courses for inspectors to take. That concludes my report, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Any more questions or comments?
We don't want to hear from you anymore.
Thank you, Jen.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Licensing division, Denise.
Denise is remote.
Good morning, everybody. Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. That report is up on the screen is applications received and renewal activity through February. And if you hone in on the center of the report, that's where the real estate inspector numbers are located. So as we've talked about last time, and even at the commission meeting, there is a dip in the number of applications received compared to this time last year. But as you recall, anytime requirements change, like they did, effective March through June of last year, we had a surge in applications received. So those were applicants that had, started the coursework and maybe just hadn't gotten around to finishing it. So we saw a surge in the number of applicants who completed the coursework under the old requirements and got their applications in prior to the June 30th deadline. So we'll continue to see that compared to last year, it looks like a dip. But what I've done is compared numbers, and I've apologize, I don't have anything on the screen to show you this, but when you compare this February, fiscal year comparison through February of 22, compare that to the same time period for fiscal year 20, you'll see we're actually up in the application numbers from 2 years ago, to the tune of about 19.3% in the overall applications and 13% higher in professional inspector applications. So we'll continue to monitor that. It's difficult when we had such a long time period, several months where we had just a record number of applications coming in. So we'll likely kind of see it taper off, or the variance won't be so great once we get past like June, July and the reports. But we'll keep monitoring it and keep you guys posted. So the next report is the license holder and registrant status. Again, inspectors are there in the center through February of 22. We're at about 4,760 total licensed inspectors. So it is gradually increasing, the number of license holders. And so applications are valid for 1 year. So that influx of applications that came in last year, we still, some people take that full year to pass the test and get all the requirements in. So we will likely continue to see an increase in the inspector license holder counts. But again, we'll keep monitoring those numbers. The next report is the graphical presentation of these figures. And so you'll see the inspector's graph in yellow. And the last report is the average number of days to process an application, and the inspector numbers are there in the center as well. So below each figure for the different application types of the number of days it takes us to process, we'll pull in how many applications we got that month. But just as a reminder, that doesn't mean those are the applications we processed in that month, because we don't consider it completely reviewed until we've gotten everything back from that inspector license applicant. So we're tallying up the times we asked for maybe 3 documents, they'll send in 1. We ask for the remaining 2 documents, they'll send in the rest. So the average is calculated on the number of applications where we received everything and we've done, all the reviewing we're going to do, and now we're just waiting on that applicant to pass the exam and get fingerprinted and do these steps that are required after exam passage. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I will say I just went through the renewal process myself, and that was compared to when I started, and even just the last 5 or 10 years on top of that, this was the quickest I think I've ever had a renewal done. It was probably like 1 business day from the time that I actually submitted it online, because I had sent my insurance information in ahead of time, like it was 2 or 3 days ahead of time. But when I actually submitted, it was like within 1 business day, boom, it turned around and was completely renewed. It's really impressive, and I think it's great that those timelines have really been shut down or brought down.
It's a combination of things. I mean, the fact that the providers are getting information, and the fact that we're constantly working on trying to streamline and get things more efficient. It's really helpful.
But it's not even a situation where, oh, no, I didn't have enough 4 hours or whatnot, because I'm a little OCD in that. I make sure everything's in there. But from the time I click, I always check to see how long it takes for that to actually come through. Because you get, 90 days? You can do it up to 90 days, and I think in advance of the expiration date. But I was impressed at how quick that was going. So things are going.
Thank you for that feedback, Lee. That's really good to hear.
Chairman, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Of the 4,760.
Guys, take your name again.
No, sorry. No problem. All good.
Sorry.
You gotta do it again. All right.
Yeah, you just gotta state your name each time.
All right. So Scott Newcomer, ETI Home Inspector Training. Of the 4,760, how many have the professional license?
Oh, it's up there.
I couldn't see it.
What, 38, I think?
I couldn't read it. Just scroll before me.
38, 48.
I'm getting too old. 38.
3848.
That's it.
And that's active.
All right, thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
All right, item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding inspection reports. Tony?
Yeah, so thank you, Sean. This is one of the items that was brought up at the last meeting, which is a possible issue with the way that the rule is currently written about delivering a report to the client 2 days of receipt of payment. I think, Lee, you brought this up about what happens if somebody schedules in advance of when they're scheduling.
Well, like if they pay in advance.
Pay in advance, right. Yeah. So we have drafted some rule language for you guys to look at that we think corrects this issue or just clarifies it. It's right here. So essentially what it says, make it a little bigger, it says, unless otherwise agreed to in writing, because we want to make sure that applies to both. The inspector shall, and the first part is exactly what the current rule says, deliver the report within 2 business days of receipt of payment, or if payment is received before the scheduled inspection, deliver the report to the client within 2 days of the complete our inspection. So that I think clears up the issue.
Question. If it's 2 business days and you guys take payment by credit card on an online website and somebody pays Friday afternoon, 2 days would run Sunday, can you make it 2 business days?
My inclination would be no, because the option period isn't business days. The option period is calendar days, and that's typically what is most tied to an inspection, is the ability to back out due while they're in their option period.
Okay, I mean, as long as you guys are okay with those inspectors, I mean, I'm that large guy, I don't care.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
but-
That was the first thing everybody asked about,
Yeah.
the business days,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
the realtors, right, the realtors changed, when it changed over, that at 5 o'clock, the contract starts on Monday, everything's signed. It used to be at the following business day. When they changed that, that's why the wording was put in that way.
Okay.
Because I got Good Friday, I hit 3 phone calls for inspections with a 3-day option.
Yeah.
Good Friday, Saturday,
Yeah.
Easter. That's what they had.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, holidays don't apply.
So if you guys are good with this, I don't know when we want to bring this forward.
I think we would hold it until August because we'll have other rule changes that impact.
Okay.
I mean, is
So
there
we're-
anything changed?
Just clarify.
It's just a clarification. It was a question that had come up.
It came up when we were creating this, I asked a
Yeah.
question, because
Well, I
I'm
think-
always prepaid, and the answer was, well, it's obvious you can't get it before the inspection.
Logic would dictate that, but it just didn't clearly state it.
And I think there's still the option of writing, you can agree to in your client writing. If you're that concerned about it, you can say, based on this is when, but since this is gonna be open, 535 is gonna be open for rule review, we would like to recommend that this change, because there may be some other changes to this be brought up at that time.
Well, while we're on this topic, and we briefly talked about this before the meeting started, there are still some areas of the state where it is standard practice for inspectors to get paid at the time of closing.
Or build a title company.
Or build a title company. And it's my understanding that in the rules, as far as in the ethics, that the payment for the inspection cannot be contingent on, the results and whatnot. And it seems to me that if we are allowing inspectors to get paid at closing, that's a substantial risk to the consumer, because what's to say the inspector isn't going to possibly word something slightly different or maybe omit or change something to make sure that that house actually closes so that they actually get paid. But that's happening a lot in some areas.
Tony?
Yeah, that should be addressed in the unless otherwise agreed in writing.
Right, but my question is, in the ethics section of our stuff, it states that that the payment for the inspection can't be contingent upon the findings of the inspector. But if I look at this, that possibly opens up otherwise agreed to in writing by client, that the inspector can get paid at closing. To me, we're a consumer protection agency, that is a huge risk to the consumer. If we're saying inspectors can't get paid at closing, what's to prevent an inspector from possibly modifying or omitting certain things out of the report to ensure that that actually closes so that they get paid?
Okay, I'm sorry.
I have a question now. I'm back to looking at that, your timeline though, that actually makes it worse for the consumer. Because if I pay in advance, you can take as long as you want to write the report, because then there's no penalty for how long you take. You can take a month, because it just says it's 2 days once you finish completion of the inspection. There's nothing to force you to go inspect it. Now you've been paid, but there's no thing that forces you, where at 1, you've got to give it to me within 2 days of inspection. So now I don't think that works.
Okay, I missed that.
Okay, let me draw the math out, and that's the easiest way. So at 1, okay, you get paid, and then 2 days later, you gotta give me a report.
Within 2 days. Yeah.
Within 2 days. On the second one, you get paid, and then the triggering is writing the report. So if you take 3 weeks to write the report, as long as 2 days after the report.
No.
The trigger is the inspection.
Completion of the inspection.
But what forces you to get the inspection? Because deliver the report within 2 days of the inspection.
Scheduled inspection.
But what I'm saying is there's nothing that forces you to schedule the inspection by the rule. There's nothing in that language.
Well, that becomes a civil matter if you pay for something and there was no inspection done.
I understand, but if you're gonna write a rule and the intent is to comply with the contract to get it to the consumer within 2 days to comply with the inspection requirement to terminate a contract, there's a loophole in there you can get out, and the inspector doesn't perform, and the inspector points at the statute and says, I complied, you know?
Well, not if he received payment for services he didn't provide.
Sure he did, he just provides them eventually, because it doesn't enforce in the statute and the rule, you know.
So
what I
you,
mean?
I want to ask you this.
Sure.
I'm going to do an inspection for you.
Yes, sir, and I pay you up front.
You paid it on Monday. You scheduled it for Friday.
Okay.
Because the agreement in there is, on the agreement is you agreed for that scheduled date. That's I have 2 days after Friday to surrender the report.
Okay.
You follow me on that?
I'm following you what you're saying.
Our agreement and our scheduling is, once we both, you sign the agreement, that you said, yes, I want it Friday morning. That's my timeline. I have to start from that timeline.
Okay, then why do you need that? If you have the otherwise agreed in writing, then can extend that out or change that around, you know, with that, because to me, it seems like it creates a loophole there, you know.
But then it goes back to the
option
option period as well.
Yeah, I'm missing a loophole.
Because then it goes into, the inspection report is intended for the option period.
Right.
That's correct. Usually what I've seen is that when the client is going to hire an inspector, they have a deadline to have the inspection done. So when they call the inspector up, they say, I need an inspection by this date. Can you do it? And if they can't do it, they'll go and hire a different inspector.
Sure.
When they hire the inspector and pay for it up front, they are typically signing an inspection agreement which states the date and time at which the inspection is going to be done.
Right.
But if they don't perform that inspection and they paid for it, there is no open end.
I understand, but that says typically, it doesn't say, because we don't have anything in here that says that will be, an inspection will be provided pursuant to a written agreement. There's nothing that requires it to be a written agreement.
No, but the 2 days doesn't trigger until the inspection actually happens.
I agree with you, that's my point, is that if there's no written agreement that says when the inspection will occur, I call you and say, come inspect my house on Friday, you say, sure, you know, and then you say, well, I haven't violated the rule because I didn't do it on timely, but I gave you a report within 2 days, give me my check.
But that's where it's saying before the scheduled inspection.
But he's saying there's nothing, but I think that's a civil matter versus a truck matter.
That's kind of what I see.
If you hire me to do something, I don't do it.
But I think that's where the whole issue gets from the consumer standpoint. If we're drafting rules to protect a consumer, to make you do the report quickly, that too doesn't force in that scenario the same 2 days. I would be better off not paying you in front and waiting and giving you your check. As a consumer, I'm in a more risky position by paying you up front.
Which they can do. There's no requirement that there's inspections paid for beforehand.
We still have people saying, oh, give me my report and then I'll pay you.
I understand your point, why you want to be paid.
This is where we get into this, because the old rule used to be surrender the inspection report 3 days after the inspection. And inspectors were not getting paid. We brought this to the table 3 years ago.
Which is a problem.
And that was a huge problem, because everybody sitting at this table, I would tell you, has lost $7,000 to $10,000 a year over that rule.
Well, and the other thing here is, if you pay for, with the way it was set before, and part of why this came up, if you pay for the inspection on Monday, the inspection is on Friday, the way it was written, I want the report on Friday, period, end of story.
Sure.
Where the rule was actually that you have at least 2 business days, or at most 2 business days, or 2 days, 2 days from the time of the inspection to do that. So the point of clarifying that was to make sure that if you pay for it on Monday, that inspector still had it up to 2 days from Friday to get that.
And I agree with you, the rule needs to be clarified. I think the clarification has unintended consequences there.
So if it was clarified just to say, if the inspection happens, the report is delivered 2 days after the inspection or 2 days after payment.
What triggers the date of the inspection?
The contract.
The agreement.
It's agreement between the client.
I mean, there is no requirement for a written agreement. You call me up, you say, I need an inspection, I say, I can do it tomorrow. That's the only agrement that is going to be done.
In enforcing a violation, we would look at whether there's an agreement, what the agreement says, and we would look at the surrounding facts and the allegations.
So if I never do the inspection.
No, I got that.
Sorry.
I got it. Schedule governor. All right. you are probably technically correct, but practically speaking, a lot of us have done thousands, if not tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of inspections. It's never been an issue across the country. When you write legislation, you are correct, we don't like unintended consequences. We had that conversation already. But practically speaking, this will never happen. But what Lee was saying, though, you have to think about, and that's one thing I want to bring up. Some of you probably know, maybe all of you already know, but Porch is going out very hard right now in convincing home inspectors if they join Porch Gold that they will pay you upfront if you get paid at closing. So you can get paid at closing, but Porch will pay you upfront for a fee, of course. So it's coming in a big way, and they're going to push this, that the inspector gets the cash up. So, but it's just something to think about as we go through this.
And we've talked about this, it came up last year or something, we talked about it, we got clarification from the merchant that was involved in that, the pay at closing program, but this is something.
And this payment isn't contingent on the client paying you. Anybody can pay you. I mean, there are people who have inspections scheduled for their kids and the parent pays it.
Right.
So the agreement's between the client and the inspector, but the payment can be from anybody. So the trigger on this is when the payment's received. Do you have a suggested clarification?
I mean, I can look at the language and try to draft something that addresses that, and
I've never seen it personally. I mean, we've done thousands of complaints over 13 years. I've never seen it. And to be honest, there's stuff in the statutes that talks about being dishonest in your inspection stuff.
Yeah.
So we could, if someone ever did something like that, that's fraudulent, yeah, it is civil, but I think we could probably button hook it into something as misleading or deceiving.
Well, we have time. I mean, as Abby said, this wouldn't get proposed until August.
Yeah, I just think it penalizes the consumer who paid early. The consumer would always be better off to pay after, the inspection has been done, because then, within 2 days of handing over a check, you're gonna get a report.
The consumer knows at the time he pays when his or her inspection's gonna happen. So he's basically
he or she has been made a representation, possibly.
So what this all comes about is the question came from inspectors and realtors, is that what if they paid early? Where does this falls in? And it's something that we spent almost a year trying to clarify this, as each client is and everything else, 2 years actually. So this word was put in, and the first thing, we all looked at everybody getting paid and everybody getting taken care of. This comes down to is, well, we have such short option period. We know the 7 and 10 days, or unless you're doing commercial, it's that. I've actually been called at 11 and been in an inspection at 6 p.m. because I got a 24-hour. So, but if your 3-5 day option period, and like Tony said, is they're jumping from inspector to inspector to get something done. But there is realtors that are still riding the 5-day option period. Mike will tell you for the area that we're now in, that is a common thing, but the people are from out of state and they want to pay. And they're,
I think you put the option period in there too, and say that it will be delivered within 2 days.
No, because the option period is completely independent of any inspection period. There's a completely different paragraph that allows the inspection of the property.
I think this does a good job of the initial goal of directing the inspector when to get the reports out. I think if you have some language, we have time.
We'll bring this back to the next agenda.
Yeah.
Fair enough. July.
We can move on.
No, I appreciate what you're saying.
July is when the committee will make the recommendation and move forward with it anyway.
Yeah.
To the August, so we can, I just wanted you guys to see that we had based
And I
on
think
what
this
you
addresses
had brought up,
your initial
the
goal.
staff has a recommendation. So, okay, so we will table this, I guess, until the next meeting, and then you guys can bring it up then, and perhaps you could provide some clarification.
In practical sense, all of mine have been prepaid for 17 years.
Yeah.
Never had a problem. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm also in the business of being paid to be paranoid.
Yeah. If we never do the inspection, it's
not triggered.
Not a whole, I mean, it's TREIC's involved because of ethics.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I'm more of in trouble because I told you I'd go do it and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Plumber, electrician.
But I think like Mike said, if we didn't show up and we're a TREIC inspector and we were hired, there could be a complaint filed with TREIC at that point too.
There would be a complaint.
Yeah, so there would be multiple avenues for the consumer to.
I've been called asking where the report is, and if we never did the inspection, they're calling the wrong inspector.
Right.
Yeah.
They went through a list, they forgot which one that said yes.
That's actually.
Installation fee.
It does.
All right, we're good? Okay, item number 10, discussion possible action regarding single system inspection. Mike, and I think Lee have this hot topic.
Yeah, I just think it's something we really need to look at, especially with, as crazy as the market has been, as we all seen, and I'm starting to see ads like this come out, and some even more blatant than this, of walk and talks, and stuff like that, and inspectors being solicited to do these quote-unquote walk and talks, 15, 20-minute walkthroughs on a house prior to the house being under contract. They get paid $75 or $50 or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if there's a way, that we can really, I want to just so over clarify that this is a huge risk to consumer that it's not even funny. But what ends up happening is they may get an initial assessment as far as what their repairs may be or whatever, things that, just at that quick 15-minute glance. But that consumer thinks that they just got the house inspected. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, as soon as that house closes and all, they find everything that's wrong, all hell is breaking loose. And they can't file, or they want to file a complaint on an inspection, but the inspection actually didn't happen. And there's, granted, if they know who it is and went through, they could file, a complaint at that time. But can they file a complaint? Like I said, it's just, I think there's too much maybe gray area here, because, and this is starting to happen a lot as a result of the way the market is. I think we need to really pick this up and fix it.
So the walk and talk, we all clearly know that's not legal, but
it still happens every day.
Mike, on the single item inspections, we're required to put notification on it. It's not a complete inspection.
I'll pull that.
There's a rule that requires a disclaimer.
If it's a single component.
Yeah.
Right, so we make that note on the report. We still generate a written report.
Not if it's a single component.
The single component, you can depart from using the form, but the caveat is you have to use that disclaimer.
Right, and you still have to produce a written report, right?
It's always been, provide a written.
Not on a single system, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a TREIC report.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
That's where, it's the only situation where you don't have to use the TREIC.
A lot of times it was created for re-inspects.
Chinese drywall.
Yeah.
I guess
10 years ago.
the question I would have about what you brought forward is if that company is in fact aware of this and doing this. Because it seems like you either have to use the inspection report, or if you don't, you have to have this applied to it.
Right.
Yeah, they're not using the inspection report, and they know what's going on, and I've talked to 2 inspectors that work for them. They know it doesn't comply, they don't provide the TREIC form with it, and their position is, well, until we get a complaint filed, or, until there's, it's just one of those things, they're just gonna keep doing it until somebody gets
Are they
caught.
following the SOPs for that component?
Well, I think one of the things we can do, minimally, but, and Summer, I can work on this with Sean, is come up with an article about that, what the requirements are for when you stray away from a full inspection, and what you have to do, just to provide clarity, for inspectors out there that are doing this particular type of work.
Why haven't there been complaints about it?
I think because people don't know what the rules are.
Well,
a lot of times I think the
most
buyer wants it
people,
probably.
they're not being informed completely or really what's happening.
Do y'all ever complain against each other?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're required to file a
This seems like
complaint.
a really good opportunity to do that.
No, it's actually, it's in our ethics rules that we are actually required, if we know of an inspection.
She said you talking to me.
Oh, I know, you'd be amazed how people do things anonymously to me and talk,
But-
yeah.
Sorry, 1 second. This is actually being, and I'm not picking on Scott anyway, you used to own a business, but if you go to AHIT's webpage, they teach you off the website how to do this.
Yeah.
And not inform you. This is also being done by other organizations, that this is the new way of coming. Porch is a prime example. They started this from the beginning. And this is, there is so many realtors moving from out of state here, that's, if you're not gonna do it, I won't use you. Because that's how we do everything here, that's how we do everything. And that's where the problem's coming down to, is I've done one, and then when I got to there and realized, she was like, no, we don't want the report, you just come to me. I said, I can't do that. And the realtor's like, oh, don't ever, I don't want you. Don't ever call me again. You're on the no suit list. But that's where it's coming down to, is the realtors are bringing this in from other states, and they're pushing this. So the manufacturers and the schools and everything else, if you type in walking talk inspection on Google, you're going to have a list of agencies and everything else. Prime example, I was just on the phone with Louisiana. Louisiana actually stated in the laws that actually go into effect September. You cannot do a minimum report. It just goes straight across the board. But it's either a full report or no report at all.
Which is, I mean, that's basically what we say, right?
Well, we have this caveat.
That's where
Except
they,
for the one.
Yeah, but it's supposed to inform the consumer that it's not a full report. And the other thing is the the things make it confusing. You mentioned it, that people are coming in, and people like Ahern are marketing to more than just Texas. Texas is the only state that requires the report that we have. So,
but Louisiana now requires it, so does
well, they don't,
New York.
They don't have the template. I guess my point is that at a very minimum, we can kind of reiterate this on our website in terms of letting people know what the requirements are. Now, whether or not you guys go further than that, that's up to you. But I'm just saying, in terms of something we can do initially, is create something on the website that helps people understand this is the universe you need to be operating.
I've always thought, from legal point, from asking this question, is that there's a transaction of a fee that has to be recorded.
Real estate transaction.
Or
It's subject to real estate transaction, doesn't even, it could be like pre-listed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you gotta, I'm gonna buy it for my friend kind of deal, and I just want to check out. It's not even on there, but they're just gonna go to the title company and transfer.
Just because it's not on the MLS doesn't mean it's not a transaction.
But that's what I'm saying, if somebody's receiving monetary gain from it, is where I'm getting to. Because when you receive money for doing an inspection, it should be on that report.
I don't have to be.
I mean,
I don't know about
argue
that.
for
It's a transaction type.
it says employment,
Employment, yes.
but employment doesn't necessarily mean being paid for some certain things.
Yeah.
We don't get that far down in the weeds. I mean,
One
the
to
thing
four
is,
families, real
if
estate
it's a
transaction.
buyer, seller, or
Well,
the
that's the way I've
anticipation of a
always put it
transaction.
to everybody I've ever taught is, if you're getting paid for something, you need to be doing it the right way.
What if we get rid of the exception that if you're just doing one system, you don't have to use the report?
One system you gotta think of is how many times we get hail damage, and we were like, hey, I want you to come out and look at it.
Just do a report and everything else.
Absolutely.
That's
Exactly.
That's
Well,
what I did.
I know, that's what,
You're still doing a
that's where-
single item though. You're still doing a single item.
Right, you're still doing a single line, but the report that's presented to the consumer is the full TREIC inspection
okay.
report that has our preamble and everything
That's
else.
why
Yeah.
I've always
We're gonna
defaulted
eliminate
for
single
people
item.
that basically that they have a client that just wants the AC and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
structure looked at, or
Right.
like, or even just one, and they don't wanna do their own, they
Right.
don't wanna do a special report. I was like, just use our form because it has all the required disclosures,
Yeah.
and you just check not inspected, and
Right.
make sure you have something, you have an
Right.
email with your client
That's where you
saying,
explained it to me,
this,
is put it
this,
at the top
this
of the
is,
report. This
I'm only
report
doing
is
this,
only
right?
for this
Okay.
category.
I mean,
Yeah.
make that recommendation.
I mean, that would be,
Yeah.
I don't think it's the solution, but I think it's at least one piece in the right
The
direction.
consumer would be informed then of all these sections at work.
Because you're forcing them to get the preamble,
Yeah,
that has all the
right.
information and where to find all the information for TREIC rules.
I think it's a bit of a nightmare for re-inspect, but we can still work with it. We can still do it. Because re-inspects a lot, if you're having to come back and check off the initial inspection.
Yeah.
So,
What do you want?
let Tom go first, Tom, go.
Real quick, Tom Langley, Turnkey Conference Specialist. So I teach a lot of students and speak with a lot of folks out of state. And New York has fallen in this walk talk big time. And as far as consumer protection is concerned, what they're starting to see now is people have gone in, they've gotten the walk talk, they've bought the house off the walk talk, and they're following up with a full inspection afterwards and finding a lot more going on in that house that would have prevented them possibly from buying it. Again, the house sells itself, so they need the full report. This is huge, huge. So the only time a walk and talk, in my opinion, should be done is for somebody considering putting their house on the market. They want to go in and they want to fix things and do things, that's a walk and talk. But for a buyer or actual seller of a property,
But that example, you can't do a walk and talk.
Exactly.
If they're considering putting their house on the market.
It's subject to transaction.
So you gotta do a report.
Exactly.
All right, Scott Newcomer. The biggest state in the country that's doing this is Washington. So you gotta do, I agree with you 100%. Either you gotta do one of two things, in my humble opinion. Either you embrace it and you create another inspection agreement, like in the state of Washington. They actually have 2 inspection agreements now. They have your full home inspection according to standard practice and everything else you follow, and they have a walk and talk inspection agreement that they have to sign because it's absolutely nuts in the Seattle marketplace. 17 home inspectors show up on one day on a Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock to do a home inspection. 17 inspectors with buyers, sellers, not sellers, buyers and realtors. 17 inspectors. They've had more than that. That's the most I know that my friend did. But on average, there are 8 to 10 inspectors showing up. Some are doing walkthroughs, some are doing full before they write their offer. It's due on Tuesday by 5 o'clock before they accept the offer. So Washington has created a second tier, if you will, to educate the consumer of what they're getting and basically what they're not getting with that new agreement. So either do that or make it illegal, one of the two, but and I agree, the consumer's not being educated on that. So it's something you can look at. You can look at the state of Washington and look at their separate agreement they have. It's actually, it's a very interesting one. It's very straightforward and the consumer's definitely very educated on it. It's better than waiving inspections. And I mean, that's crazy across the country. Somebody writes an offer, there's 4 offers, 6 offers, 10 offers. They're waiving home inspections. They're writing cash offers. They're doing anything to get the house, but we're getting waived a lot. So it's something that I think.
The contract in the lack of option period doesn't waive the inspection. The buyer may choose to waive the inspection, but the contract gives them the right to inspect the property up until the day of closing. So that has absolutely nothing to do with the option period. You can have no option period whatsoever, and the buyer still has a right to inspect that property per the contract.
So what would be the solution to revising this where
If you want to require the form all the time, we would just, staff would go back and tweak it, bring the recommendation back to the committee.
Which means if you do it with a report, you can do the walk and talk all you want.
It's just gonna have to be on that report.
It has to be on that report.
And at least the consumer will have the preamble with all of our TREIC's information, which is what the real rules are.
We can do that.
That way you're embracing it, you're allowing to do this.
Which, some of this may be semantics, right? The single system inspection, what you're saying is that you would require the form. You cannot, in Texas, do a walk and talk and not fill out an inspection report. Basically, essentially, complete the inspection and do a report, which means that you can't do a walk and talk in Texas.
Right.
Which I think means we can work on the communication.
Yeah, the communication, everything would do help.
There's 2 kind of approaches to that, the one that Chelsea just brought up in terms of communicating that, but also if that's what the committee wants staff to do, we can bring back a tweaked rule, amended recommendation on how to.
I mean, I think it would address the issue where the consumer is informed of all the sections that were not inspected. So if they hired us to only check the roof, they would know that the electrical wasn't checked.
Or that investor is looking at the property, I only want you to look at the foundation, that's all I care about.
But the way I read, just real quick, the way I read this that you brought forward, if you choose more than one, they have the reports required. You can't stray from the report if it's a single inspection.
They should be, yeah.
Right, so when it says choose 1 or 5, it's only the one where this would apply. The rest of them, they would have to use the inspection report if you pick 2 or more.
In its current rule, yeah.
And I remember when this came around. It was about 10 or 11 years ago, when the guys from Beaumont were doing a lot of Chinese drywall. And they were, I don't want to say tired, but it was a lot of work to do the report and everything when they had a pre-filled Chinese drywall inspection. And the consensus from the committee was we should be able to do one item without the report, like I was just looking at mine down in the footer, it has that verbatim in there where it says, this is not a full TREIC inspection, if that's what you want. And that's on the footer. Anything that goes out with me that's not on a 7-point whatever. But it was primarily the Chinese drywall, but I use a lot for roofs. Right after last weekend in our area, I was getting calls that night.
So does the committee have a desire to move to the point of requiring a report to be generated a official TREIC report to be generated on single items or a full inspection, or do we want to stick with the way
And what
the
triggers
rules?
this is the fact that you're a TREIC inspector. If you're not a TREIC
Right.
inspector, which we see all the time.
Right, and
Well,
you're
if
bound by these
if
things.
you're just going to look at a roof because of a storm, if it's not subject to a sales transaction, then none of this applies anyway.
Right. Or with apartment complex.
No,
Over 4 units.
I will say this, during the Snowmageddon and everything else, I put out a damage assessment inspection report that our houses were under contract. And then we called it a dare, and we checked off the items that we were not inspecting. And we went through and re-inspected the items that they were in the middle of a transaction to make sure that they're done. Most of the roofs, foundations, plumbing and stuff is what we went after. But I still did an inspection report because it was more than one item. Just a little bit of clarification that if you do not complete it, you do any more than one item, then the standard report is required.
Right.
By adding that word would make everybody go, oh, okay, that changes everything.
Or more.
I think it's in
That's
there.
correct. It doesn't have that language.
It doesn't have that language in
And
there.
and that would be another option, if you guys wanted to keep what the intent of the rule is, which is when you do a single inspection, you can. So there's two options there, there's require it always, or if you're gonna do the single inspection, maybe as Scott mentioned, clarify that anything above a single component requires the inspection.
I'd rather just keep it simple, just require all.
Because I'd rather require it always too. I think I understand it started with the Chinese drywall and that made perfect sense. You know, I was here when all that happened.
After the
But
storm.
you can build a template for that very, very easily.
No, and that's why I'm getting what Steve was saying too, is the same thing. The storm, a bunch of people were having new houses built and stuff like that, we went back and actually did 7 houses last week after the storm, and all we did was going back to look at the roof. And we're still in the option period.
What
So
it
I
costs
did
from the
this.
mortgage company,
Yes.
this thing is, they had a home inspection, everything done, they're waiting to close.
They just
All
deny
the
everything
mortgage
up to the roof.
companies.
Yeah.
But if I'm just going up there on a roof, I'm just looking at the roof, and then I can do my own little report and do that, and I'm done.
And if you're using software, you can easily build a template for roof inspection, where
Yeah.
everything's checked, not inspected,
Except for the roof.
and you plug in the
That's a
information.
common thing that you do. And I understand, it is a
You
little
just
bit more
plug
of a
it-
pain in the
plug it
butt.
every
I
time.
completely
Yeah.
get that. My concern is, with this little caveat in there, it's opening the door for how our industry is starting to evolve.
And the
So I think that
consumer,
if we change the wording to say, if more than one is chosen, more than one item is inspected, then the 7-6, the current report is required. That would eliminate everything we're talking about.
Okay, I missed that, so say that.
So, and where it says, a single component can be, if you're only doing a single component,
right,
Okay.
then you can do a separate report. Any more than a single component, then the current report is required.
But again, in your situation, house is under contract, Snowmageddon, blah, 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 I get it from that perspective. What happens in the one I just mentioned where the investor comes in and goes, all I want you to do is just look at the foundation. That's all I want.
You know, a lot of investors, and they say, well, I'm gonna do the same, I'm gonna do the whole report. Well, yeah, if you want just foundation, then you're
But
gonna.
according to that, I can just write up a little Word document that says, yeah, foundation's good, and not follow the standards.
Well, no, it doesn't say you can't not follow the standards.
Just doing one?
One component means you follow the standards of that component.
I think that's just.
You just
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
This is addressing the report form, this section right here is.
I would vote for, even if you do a single, just use the form.
That's where I'm at.
I'm just playing all the way around the
I know, I hear
circle,
you.
that's the whole
All
thing,
right,
so look at it.
what are you at?
I think, well, you just report.
Okay, let's bring a proposal to recommend a report form be used on every
Yeah, because
inspection.
every section has something to do with another section.
So this would just be changed where they don't have.
I'm just thinking outside the box, I'm sorry, I wanted to bring it all the way around.
We'll bring something back in July for you guys to discuss.
Well, I think the content of that preamble is very important. Everything that's in there, that's all consumer information, the old list guy that's been integrated.
I think
We've got a discussion as to which way
I think
possible.
it addresses the issue of.
But I said that at the
not
beginning,
knowing.
it's just stuff, that's
But
what
I
wanted to be
think, I
done.
think with that and communication, you know,
Right.
keep track as far as getting that out there about these walk-in talks, because it's just getting insane.
We talked about the walk and talk last summer.
Crazy, but
We actually,
yes.
I don't live there, I don't hear about it, but.
we started
No one's
this
telling
almost
me.
2 years ago. It actually, like Scott said, it can't.
Well, and I'll bring it up at TREIC meeting, if we have 150 inspectors on there, it's a good place to get that out. That walk and talks are not allowed, and also, if you know people are doing walk and talks, it might be a good opportunity to reduce your competition.
Well,
yeah.
We'll also do, we'll do some, messaging on our website.
Yeah.
Reduce your competition, I like that.
Well, the kind of triggers for that is, it's in relation to a buy or sell.
Yeah.
You're an inspector, and you're
One of
visiting the
four- one of
house,
four family dwelling.
then SOP and form is required.
Yeah, so you can walk and talk, you then have to submit, do a form.
Right.
Do a report.
Yeah.
And call the SOP.
That's right.
That's not gonna be like everybody advertised, a 30-minute inspection. No, I'm okay, because that just changes everything.
All right. Item number 11, discussion and possible action on late renewal. Tony, you got this one.
Yeah, and I may need some help from Abby on this, but essentially, so there is a provision currently in the late renewal part of, or the renewal part of 535-216 dealing with late renewals that mirrors a provision on the real estate license holder side that allows an inspector whose license has expired to renew and without any loss in active licensure, so long as a sponsor tests that that person was supervising prior for that 6-month period in which their license was officially expired. It's the same thing on the real estate side. The commission is getting rid of that component for consumer protection reasons and other ones. They're saying, no, if your license is expired, you can't look back and say, oh, you were working, but as long as somebody said, oh, I was supervising it, that it's okay to do that. So we're recommending also removing that provision for the inspectors as well, that 6-month look back, so that if your license is expired, you still have the ability to late renew, but you're no longer able to work during that period that your license is officially expired.
Well, I've read findings that people have been fined for having an expired license and still doing an inspection.
That's unlicensed activity.
That is
Those
licensed,
are
because they
professionals,
may not have an attest.
Oh, you're talking, well, no, there was actually, Mike, I'm sorry, there was somebody that didn't renew their sponsorship license.
On a print, or real estate inspector, their sponsor expired.
Their sponsor expired.
Now their license is contingent on that, so they don't have a license.
So here's the provision, yeah, and this is something, when we added the late renewal component in the inspection in 1102, we just pulled this language over. According to Denise, inspectors they very rarely late renew, they're usually very timely on renewals. So this has not been an issue in any real way. But because we want to be consistent in our approach to consumer protection, we wanted to bring this up to you. There's some other changes that will be recommended as part of rule review, but this is the big one we wanted you guys to look at and see if you're okay with removing that provision. That look back to allow people to work, essentially do unlicensed activities so long as the sponsor signs off.
I mean, isn't there somewhere else in the rules that if you're going to inspect, you have to have an active license?
Yeah, I'm good with getting rid of this. I don't like having an exception.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize
that you could do an inspection on an expired license.
Well, again, I don't think this has happened. We just really want to make sure, because it has on the real estate side that we this in the right across the board.
I would be honest with you, I don't know, I can't count how many times I would be in the middle of doing a training class and the guy's standing in front of the can going, when do I get my hours, because my license is, I have to renew it tomorrow.
Yeah, but in comparison to sales agents, inspectors are much better at renewing.
I know, but I'm just giving you that, that's really common in the industry, and it's sad, because I look at him and I'm sorry, Jen, if you ever get this call, because I would call and tell him to ask for an extension, even though I'm putting it in. So I'm the one that asks to tell people.
Late renewed. What this does is say that he's just not able to work until he late renews.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, it's just your license expired, it's expired until you actually go through the process of late renewing.
Yeah. So you can't inspect, yes.
So,
Can't inspect
is the committee's good with making that move?
Yeah.
Is there anything else in the rule that you needed to bring up? It's all non-substantive, right?
Yeah, and we're still working on, so I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but we are undergoing quadrennial review, which basically means that the agency is required every 4 years to look at every single rule and determine whether it needs to continue, if we need to make changes, et cetera. And so we are undergoing that right now this year, and we're gonna be looking at 535, which is where all the inspector rules live. And so we'll have some really nonsensical changes for the most part. It's like changing administrator to executive director, terminology changes like that. But there are a few handful of things that are more substantive that will.
But yeah, you guys will all see that. That's not anything that you want to see at the July meeting. Before there's a recommendation, we'll need you guys to make a recommendation and move it forward to the commission.
All right. Any other discussion on that? All right. Item number 12, items for future meeting agenda. We got several things from today's.
So we got a 2-day,
clarification. We got the, you're gonna bring back some virtual practicum stuff on, just researching that.
On the what?
The education subcommittee is gonna look at.
Oh,
Staff will be looking at that as
Yeah.
well. And then we have the form, changing the form rule to require it for all inspections regardless of whether they're single inspections or not.
And can we also look at, like we talked about briefly, about the getting paid at closing on inspection? Is that something that could possibly, in some form, be a rule?
It's always been an ethics issue that if you want to get paid, I'm inclined to make sure the report doesn't kill your deal. So that was always an ethics issue.
It seems like there could be some gray, obviously there's some gray area, people wouldn't continue to be doing it on such a broad scale.
Can I get clarification on that? That's not, you're not, and I just want to clarify, you're not talking about a marketing thing where somebody says, I'm I'm paying the inspector up front, and then I get reimbursed at closing for those costs.
That's, I think, Porch is what Porch is doing, that's part of it.
We clarified that though.
But my question is that if
That's not what I'm referring to.
you're talking about a single inspector who says, I'm okay with being paid by the title company and closing.
No, he's not okay with it. What he's
No.
being told by the agent, the sales agent, is that I need you to get paid at closing for this because the buyer doesn't have the money right now. And if they say no, I'm not gonna do it, they say, you're not getting an inspection.
Or
And they're
they're
using it as an
building the title
ultimatum.
companies and waiting for the money and hoping it comes.
Basically, if the deal doesn't close, they don't get paid, so it's
Exactly.
contingent.
Right, and if they back out of the deal.
I mean, it could be a civil matter, they can go and
No,
file
I
that
just
way.
want a clarification on that,
Isn't
okay?
that a business decision? Like, I'm gonna, I mean, if you're an inspector who's willing to do the work without getting paid,
There's
don't they have
parts
the
of
right to
Texas
do
that.
that?
I think there was.
And I can see that in certain aspects being a business decision. My concern is that from a consumer's perspective, what is to prevent the possibility of that inspector omitting or lightening how something sounds to ensure that it closes so that he makes sure that he gets paid?
It's always a problem because agents will categorize inspectors as you always find something wrong.
Oh, they'll say all sorts of things, and that's all fine and dandy. But my concern is, this is an opening to possibly deceive consumers on what could be the biggest purchase of their life.
Yeah.
And the inspector doesn't have the choice because you have a whole group of agents, whole association up there basically, that is basically saying, if you don't do it this way, that's how we do it up here, it's not gonna happen. Even though I see it as still an ethics violation with what is written in our ethics rules.
Practically, I've been asked to have somebody.
But you're in a common
paid.
area that
Yeah.
it's everything's paid.
Yeah.
But you gotta think of East and West Texas have never changed.
I've done a ton of inspections in East
Some
Texas.
people can't
That's a
afford
rarity here and
inspection
there.
on the way.
And
But it's
most
possible.
inspectors are
See,
charged.
oh no,
for
it's certainly
fees.
possible. I've had 5 or 6 different ones from Amarillo that have told me about this. And in fact, when Avis was still the chair, she was actually going up there and she was speaking to, their association of realtors up there and caught a lot of feedback because that was just common practice up there. And she went up and goes, you guys can't do this and here's why. And once you explain it, people go, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. You don't want, you want the consumer to get the actual information, the factual information about the house, not the buttered down version, because the inspector wants to make sure he gets paid because it closes. But it's still going on to this day.
This is a good topic for our, as we're talking about rolling into our next version of the SOP legal ethics course. This is a great topic.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this in the education subcommittee as a hot topic,
Yeah.
as well, but, I just wanna see if it's something we put on the future agenda, just to look at as a possible, if there's some way we might be able to look at it.
We can look at it, we'll look at it, and see if there's something that we can bring and recommend, if possible.
Okay. Just nice way of saying it's probably not gonna happen.
No, if my last way of saying, if it's determined that it's more of a business issue than it is something that we can do by rule, we'll have to talk about it.
I think it's, you know, it's a situation where we were talking about earlier with the loophole of actually doing an inspection. I think it's that.
I see it as a huge consumer protection issue, because I can see where people may word something a certain way, or a little picture or something, just to ensure that that thing closes. And that was the whole point of what that rule is in the ethics.
Right, and I guess why I say I wanna look at it is because it seems like that's already a violation if that's happening, if the rule is in place. Like, there's already a violation, if whatever they're doing is, the inspection's contingent on getting paid or whatever, is contingent on closing, that's already a violation of the rule that's in place.
I think that was the intent of the rule, but the fact that it says contingent, the agent or the buyer can come back and say, well, even if it closes, I'm still gonna pay. But it still leaves, it's, you know, they can say they're gonna pay.
Any other items for July's meeting?
I'll send you information.
Okay. We'll have your, yeah.
Are you good with these future meeting dates?
Yeah, that's the other thing. July 18th, we talked about that last month, or last time we met. July 18th still work for everybody? Right?
Dave, does it work for you? Okay, great.
Everybody's good with it? All right, July 18th, 10 a.m. In person.
Oh, there's.
Hand up?
I don't see any hands up. Vanessa, can you tell me whose hands are up?
I thought I saw Shannon Gatewood's hand up a couple of times, maybe.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did not see that.
I saw it go up, but it went down.
Yeah, I think it went down.
Do you have the meeting that follows July on there by chance?
October.
Yeah, it'll be
17th.
It'll be that Monday, October.
Perfect. Oh my good. What is it, Columbus Day?
No, it's budget finance association.
We have a long day of driving.
All right.
Well, we can address that one, we
Yeah.
can address that at the next meeting.
All right.
He's telling you.
That one's not till 1:30, so I'm not gonna do that.
telling you that's not gonna happen.
He's like,
We're gonna keep that date?
too bad.
I'm not saying, that's up to you guys, I'm just saying.
I might be able to do budget finance virtual.
It is President's, it is Columbus Day. No, it's something. All right. Something my kids are.
No, the 10th.
I think it's the week before that.
Okay.
It's like a fall break
Oh,
scenario.
yeah. All right. Any other items? Okay, let's adjourn this meeting.
What time?
11:58.
All right, thank you, everybody online, appreciate it.
Foundation that you have about.